Hey there, so this is a simple example on how to create a Spritesheet HTML web page. So I'm going to start off by just going over to my Mac Finder, and it doesn't matter if you use Mac or Windows, but the format is basically the same. So if you use a Windows computer, we're still going to just use Chrome. And I'm going to close this actually. What we want to do is we want to open a new Chrome window, and I am going to also open a program called Sublime. Now you might use Notepad++ or Coda. Some people use Atom. They are all text editors. I prefer to use Sublime just because it's very compatible with Mac's command line. We can talk about that a little bit later or a different time, but if you use Sublime, I prefer to use Sublime. So here I've got a project open. This is my Sublime project, but this one I don't need right now, so I'm just going to close it, and I'm going to open a new file here. So this will give me a blank page in Sublime. It's not anything yet, but what we can do is we can save this. So I'm going to save it as an index.html. Then I'm going to go to my desktop. Same thing in Windows. If you're going to your desktop, you're just going to click desktop or wherever your desktop is. And we're just going to save it here. So there is my index.html page. I just created it. Now I'm going to create a simple web page. So in Sublime, the reason I like it, one of the nice things you can do is after you've saved the HTML page, you can just type the word HTML and press Tab on your keyboard, and it'll create this HTML template for you. So that's very nice. So now I'm going to type in this title area, my sample web page. Okay, let's save that and simply just Command S, Control S on a Windows, or you can hit File and hit Save. Next, I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to press Open in Browser. Now, in my Chrome, I'll see my index.html page. Good so far? Okay, let's keep going. So now I'm shrinking this HTML web page, and I'm going to work with my Spritesheet. So again, I'm back over to my Finder. In your Windows, this is just Explorer. So you're going to open your Explorer or Finder, and I'm going to navigate over to my Equate room. This is a folder I've created for myself. And then I'm going to navigate to Budget Van Lines, and then I'm going to look for my Spritesheet. So my Spritesheet could be this thing. No, it's this thing. So here, how it says Spritesheet 1 compressed pane, I'm going to use this one. So what I can do is, I've got this preview here, which is what I use, to look at the image. Some people use Photoshop, other people use something else. Let's take a look at just this Spritesheet for now in this viewer. So I'm going to close this out now, and I'm going to just start off by creating a simple div here. And this div doesn't have anything in it yet. We could write something in here, but we don't have to. So I'm just going to leave it alone. And next I'm going to create a class. And to do that, I'm just going to go into my head tag, and I'm going to press style. And I'm going to, for the sake of simplicity, use inline styles today, but I'll also show you how to put this into a link tag afterwards so you can link the style sheet. So here, I want to create like a header here. I want to create something simple. Like I want to have the header, and I want to have budgetvanlines.com there. So how would I do that? Well, in my div here, I can call this class header, right? So then up here we'll define header, and I'll just give it some simple styling. Let's say background, and let's see, I'm going to use a tool I have on my Mac for color picking. It's called Color Picker, and it's a little slow and buggy, but it's okay. For my purposes, I just want to use it for whatever. So let's see, what's a good color? Why don't we choose this color? So I'll get that color, and I'll make this background color here the same color that I picked by pasting it in from this helpful tool. Now you may have something similar on Windows, so whatever color tool you use, it's up to you. I'm gonna give this thing also a height, 50 pixels, and I'm just gonna make the width span 100%. Normally it does by default, but we just want to see how it looks. So far, so good. Let's refresh this page, and now I have my header. So far, so good. Now, I want to put this image that I have here into that header too. So how would I do that? Well, what we can do is we can put a background image here, and we can just do URL, and then we need to get this image somehow into our path. So what we can do is, since we're working in a desktop and we've got an index.html here, we need to create a folder. So I'll create a folder, a new folder here, same thing in Windows, and I'll just call it my project. Now, I'm going to close out of this because any more work I do here will get saved up on the desktop. So let's go ahead and save this one more time as it is, and I'm going to close it. Now I'm going to drag this over and put this into my folder. So now I'm working within my folder, and I want to get this image too, and I want to put it into there. So I'm going to open another Finder window, another Explorer, and I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to paste this here. So now I've got a copy of my Spritesheet. Let's close this, we don't need it anymore. And now I'm going to come back here, and I'm just going to drag my entire project over into Sublime. Now you can do the same thing, you can just click on Sublime and you can open it up the same way from the desktop, that's fine. Coming back to my index.html, now that the paths are correct, I can just come here and I'm going to just rename, and that's a quick shortcut for copying the name of the image that I want to link to. So here I'm going to put in quotes, the image, and let's just see, we need to, whenever we do something like this, we always need to put a height and a width and a background size. So let's do background size, and I'll just have here my X value and my Y value. So here I'll just say that this is whatever, 100 pixels. This is also 100 pixels. And let's take a look at this. So we don't see anything right now. Can you guess why? Well, yeah, we have to open the path, the index.html from here now, because it's no longer in our desktop. Okay, so now the Spritesheet's loaded. So now we see the image. Good so far. And here's a quick tool we can use. It's called the inspector. All I have to do is right click and inspect the element. And now I can start playing with this Spritesheet sort of in real time. Okay, so Chrome doesn't like my background size X and size Y, but we can come back to that later. Let's focus on another property called background position. And let's start with an X value here. And I'm just going to say 0. Then in my background Y, position Y, I'm going to start with 0 also. So that keeps the image at 0, 0. But let's say I want to move this up a bit. So to move it up, I would just press over here. Let's see. We have to define this in pixels. Say 10 pixels. So by doing 10 pixels, this thing pushes the image down 10 pixels. If I want to move it up, I need to use negative values, and that'll move the image up a little bit. And then, as you can see, as I'm scrolling basically up, or pushing down on my keyboard, I can see most of the image scroll up in that header. It's pretty cool. Okay, so coolness aside, what we need to do is we need to get the image to look correct. So I'm going to take this back to 0. And now I'm going to just focus on having a simple width. So our header is great, but it's 100% of the entire window. So what we can do is, instead of having our background image here, we can take this background image and background size and position and all that stuff, and we can put that into something else. So let's see, here inside of our header, I'm going to create another div, and I'm going to give this one a class of budget logo. So now, when I'm working inside my header, I also want to make sure that I'm working with my correct CSS class. So why do I do it like this? Well, anytime you put a class inside of a header, anytime you put a class inside of another class, that makes that class always linked to only the parent class. If I were to leave this outside by itself, that means globally, anytime you see a budget logo, apply the styles that I defined here. And that's no good. We only want this class to be here inside the header class. Anywhere else is a problem for us. And as you start building out CSS more, you want to be extremely specific with how you use classes and also how you use IDs. So here I've defined that I want my budget logo to have a background image, and let's go ahead and do that here. I'll just paste in that background image. And now let's, inside here, give this one a height of 100 pixels and a width of 300 pixels. And we'll just use background position like we did before, and I'm going to use a shorthand. So this is my X and this is my Y, as opposed to just writing it like that. And I'll also get rid of this, a little bit of cleanup. So let's save, refresh, and now my header still looks great, but I've got all this stuff here. So it needs a little bit more work, and we can fix that with the inspect element. So to get it right, we'll just use the inspector and push down on our keyboard until the width is absolutely perfect. Do you see how like the image starts to become a little bit clear and lose a lot of that stuff at the bottom? It's good. If I go too far, it starts erasing the image. It's not what we want. So that looks just about right. 245. And then we want our logo to also come up a bit in height. So let's move the height up just enough until it looks perfect. Okay, that's too far. That looks fine. Okay. Another way you could have done this is just by like going to your image and moving around your tool here and just getting the actual size that it would be. So that looked pretty close actually. So if I grab this again, do you see how this is 244 by 51 and here it's 245 by 52? So use a combination of, your image editor tool and your inspector to get the right fit. Okay, So far so good. We've got the header and we've got the nice logo. Now let's come over here and let's copy all this. And let's just put this back here. So that's going to replace our older code. So let's press tab here and get everything to look nice. Okay, so far so good. Now let's see, I want these people here. That's the next thing I want. So let's go ahead and create another div. And this one we'll call this the main content. And again, nothing in it, that's fine. But over here we'll continue to define our CSS. So I'll create a class called main. And this time I want it to have a height of, let's say, I don't know, 400 pixels. And by default it'll be 100%. So, and then let's give this a background color just so we can see it. And we'll do something like, I don't know, 999. Come back here and refresh. Now here's our page. That color looks a little bit weird, so I'm going to come here into my inspector, and I'm just going to move around until I find a nice little color. That looks good enough, so I'll copy this, and I'll put this here. Now make sure you have only one hashtag, because if you have two, it's going to break your code. Refresh, looks good. Okay, next, want to use the Spritesheet again, and I want to get this image here. So I'm going to drag around on my image, and again, this might be Photoshop for you, until I get the right fit. And it doesn't have to be completely 100% right, you just need an approximation. So that's about 425, because we can always fix this with the inspector tool afterwards. So 425 by 359. So I'm going to create another div in here, and I'm going to call this moving people, because that's what that looks like anyway, right? People moving. So again, I'm going to preface this with main, and I'm going to just call this moving people. Without the main, this would apply everywhere, and that's no good. We want to trap this class inside of main. Here I'm going to use my estimates, so I already forgot them. If you use Photoshop, it's a lot better than this kind of tool, but 423 by 355. So 355 height, width 423 pixels. Again, how do we get the image? We just do the same thing we have here, background dash image, and we use our URL. Now, let's take a look at it. Ooh. So we have a height and a width, but it's not the correct image. So how do we get the correct image? Well, simple, you just inspect element, and we're going to use background positioning again. And if we look at the first value, that's our X value. So our X value can stay put. And it's jumping around because it's like, oh, well, where do you want me to go next? But it thinks I'm doing X and Y at the same time. So if I want to make Y come up, I have to define it here. Okay, so I made my Y come up a little bit. But remember, a positive number makes the image go down. So we need a negative number to make the image come up. So I'm going to make this image come up, and I'm going to do this a little faster. And there we go. There's our nice little image. Now, we see that there's a little bit of stuff at the bottom, so we can fix that a little bit. Maybe by just, see if I move the X around, you see how the image goes X and Y, goes left and right. This controls the left and right values. This controls the Y values. So if I press up on my keyboard, that moves the image down. And if I press down on my keyboard, that moves the image up. So we want the image to come down, so I'm pressing up on my keyboard. And I want it to be just right. Okay. Next, oh, we still have that map at the top. So the next thing I can do is I can also fix the height here too. And I don't want to cut off the people's legs, so just enough until it's correct. Okay, so now back in our main, we can get this to look just right with the people by bringing up the main just also. Cool. So now you can see that we've got 2 images on the page, but we're only using 1 image resource. If I were to inspect the element again on this page, and I were to check my network, you can see I only have 1 image. If I refresh the page, oh, we lost all of our stuff. But it's okay, because we can just put down here position, 0 pixels, and something about, I think it was 300 pixels. We can always fix it, right? So refresh, and bring this back up again. And using, going to this value here, using the keyboard and pressing down, I'll get it right again. So 342.
The apocalypse.
And then I'll also fix my main height by making that also 342. It's a little bit off. Let's make it 346. Let's see. There we go. So 352 is good enough. So if I save it, now if I refresh, it's stuck at that. That's cool. And again, like I was saying, you only have 1 image. If I were to do an empty cache and hard reload, you could see that this page only took 100 milliseconds to load. So it's really nice, especially when you're designing and you want to make very fast, quick websites. Working with Spritesheets is optimal. I'll do one more exercise just so you have a good idea of how to do this by yourself. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mess with the header a little bit, and then I'll build one more div that uses one of these images, like this big map here. So let's do that. So let's see here. The header I want to make, I don't know, white now. So I'll just do FFF. So that gets this looking good. And actually, I want to save this color, and I want to put that into my main. And then I'm going to keep this FFF for white. So now that looks pretty good, but I want to move this to the left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create one more div, and I'm just going to put map. That's what I'm going to call it. And let's see here. Because I'm working in main, we're going to preface our class with main first, and then map. Okay? Then what I want to do is I want to float this to the right. So now this is hugging the right. And then I want to have something else here. So let's see, I want to float this left. And I'm just going to have this have a width of whatever, 200 pixels or 100 pixels. Actually, I think that's too small. Let's do 600 pixels. And we'll create one more div here called a footer. And I'll just put some content here. That looks about right. Save, and then don't forget we need a class here called footer. And because we're working out of main now, footer is a class by itself. It's not within this. And we're going to have to clear both because we floated elements. So let's take a look, and there's my copyright. Let's center it. Cool. And let's see here. What do I want to put in my map? I want to put a map here, right? So let's go back here and measure this. So I'm measuring it, and it looks about like it's 394 by 255, 396 by 246. So let's, for now, just put 394 here. And we're going to use the same URL we've been using all this time. And we're just going to put background image here. And let's just grab this background position because we want to be working with this in the inspector tool. You can always fix this later. So save. Save as usual. And let's come back here and let's refresh. So now I'm seeing two of the maps. This one's floated left, this one's floated right. But I don't want that. I want the map. So in order for me to get the map, I have to look at the background positioning. Now you can probably get this right by just measuring from the top of your image. And you see if I come down about 84 pixels, that kind of tells me, okay, I need to just do negative 84. So this is my 0 value actually. And that gives me the map right away. That's pretty cool. It's a cool trick. So remember, just use your photo and just kind of guess down until you get to the right approximation, 84 or 100. And then, let's see here. So we want to get it just right. So let's move this up a little bit more. So I'm pressing down on my keyboard, and that's moving the image up. And let's see here. Now I've got this guy's head still there, so I can fix that with the height. And now I've got my map. Cool. Now how do I get it so that this image is kind of aligned nicely with this image? Oh, we can always do a couple things here. One, I choose, there's always different ways to do it in CSS. I'm going to choose to do a relative positioning. And I am going to bring this down with a top value and a left value. So I'll just do 10 pixels. Actually, let's do 100 so we can see it. And let's see here. That looks about nice. And then I want to bring this to the left a little bit. So that's too much. That looks just about right. You see that? I've got like this nice web page. And if I like move this out, it looks fine. Of course, when I bring it down here, we're going to need responsive media queries because that's too small, but this works for most desktop applications, so that's kind of nice. One more thing here, let's fix this padding. So I'll just give this a little bit of padding at the bottom. And that looks great. So I'm going to copy this, and let's not lose our work this time. So I'm going to put this in my header because it's header, not the logo. Then I'm going to come back to map, and I'm going to grab all this stuff here. And I'm just going to put that right here. And now, let's just bring this to the right. It looks good. Let's save, refresh. There's my project. Not bad, right? Let's take a look at the network again. Empty cache. Boom, 14 milliseconds. Is that for real? 79 milliseconds. Pretty good. So that was a quick tutorial on how to create simple web page using a Spritesheet. I hope you got something out of it. If you have any questions, definitely hit me up on email or Skype. That just basically means just send me a message. And I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching.